ancient scriptures tell us, when immortality was within the grasp of mankind. A golden age it was, when man lived with his Creator in the Garden of Eden. Man tending the wonderful orchard, God taking strolls in the afternoon breeze, and the Lord God caused to grow from the ground every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for eating. And the tree of life was in the orchard, and the tree of knowing good and evil. And a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it was parted and became four principal streams. The name of the first is Pishon, and of the second Gihon, and of the third Tigris, and the fourth river is the Euphrates. Of the fruit of every tree were Adam and Eve permitted to eat, except the fruit of the tree of knowing. But once they did, tempted by the serpent, the Lord God grew concerned over the matter of immortality. Then did the Lord Yahweh say, Behold, the Adam has become as one of us, to know good and evil. And now might he not put forth his hand, and partake also of the tree of life, and eat, and live forever? And the Lord Yahweh expelled the Adam from the Garden of Eden, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden the cherubim, and the flaming sword which revolveth to guard the way to the tree of life. So was man cast out of the very place where eternal life was within his grasp. But though barred from it, he has never ceased to remember it, to yearn for it, and to try to reach it. Ever since that expulsion from paradise, heroes have gone to the ends of earth in search of immortality. A selected few were given a glimpse of it, and simple folk claimed to have chanced upon it. Throughout the ages, the search for paradise was the realm of the individual. But earlier in this millennium, it was launched as the national enterprise of mighty kingdoms. The New World was discovered, so we have been led to believe, when explorers went seeking a new maritime route to India and her wealth. True, but not the whole truth. For what Ferdinand and Isabel, King and Queen of Spain, had desired most to find was the fountain of eternal youth, a magical fountain whose waters rejuvenate the old and keep one young forever, for it springs from a well in paradise. No sooner had Columbus and his men set foot in what they all thought were the islands off India, the West Indies, than they combined the exploration of the new lands with a search for the legendary fountain whose waters made old men young again. Captured Indians were questioned, even tortured by the Spaniards, so that they would reveal the secret location of the fountain. One who excelled in such investigations was Ponce de Leon, a professional soldier and adventurer who rose through the ranks to become governor of the part of the island of Hispaniola, now called Haiti, and of Puerto Rico. In 1511, he witnessed the interrogation of some captured Indians. Describing their island, they spoke of its pearls and other riches. They also extolled the marvelous virtues of its waters. A spring there is, they said, of which an islander grievously oppressed with old age had drunk. As a result, he brought home manly strength and has practiced all manly performances, having taken a wife again and begotten children. Listening with mounting excitement, Ponce de Leon, himself an aging man, was convinced that the Indians were describing the miraculous fountain of the rejuvenating waters. Their postscript, that the old man who drank of the waters regained his manly strength, could resume practicing all manly performances, and even took again a young wife who bore him children, was the most conclusive aspect of their tale. For in the court of Spain, as throughout Europe, there hung numerous paintings by the greatest painters, and whenever they depicted love scenes or sexual allegories, they included in the scene a fountain. Perhaps the most famous of such paintings, Titian's Love Sacred and Love Profane, was created at about the time the Spaniards were on their quest in the Indies. As everyone well knew, the fountain in the paintings hinted at the ultimate lovemaking, the fountain whose waters make possible all manly performances through eternal youth. Ponce de Leon's report to King Ferdinand is reflected in the records kept by the official court historian Peter Martyr de Angleria. As stated in his Decade de Orbe Novo, Decades of the New World, the Indians who had come from the islands of Lucaos, or the Bahamas, had revealed that there is an island in which there is a perennial spring of running water of such marvelous virtue, that the waters thereof being drunk, perhaps with some diet, make old men young again. Many researches, such as Ponce de Leon's Fountain of Youth, History of a Geographical Myth by Leonardo Oschki, have established that the Fountain of Youth was the most popular and characteristic expression of the emotions and expectations which agitated the conquerors of the New World. Undoubtedly, Ferdinand, the King of Spain, was one of those so agitated, so expectant for the definitive news. So when word came from Ponce de Leon, Ferdinand lost little time. He at once granted Ponce de Leon a patent of discovery, dated February 23, 1512, authorizing an expedition from the island of Hispaniola northward. The Admiralty was ordered to assist Ponce de Leon and make available to him the best ships and seamen, so that he might discover without delay the island of Bimini. The king made one condition explicit, that after having reached the island and learned what is in it, you shall send me a report of it. In March 1513, Ponce de Leon set out northward to look for the island of Bimini. The public excuse for the expedition was a search for gold and other metals. The true aim was to find the fountain of eternal youth. This the seamen soon learnt, as they came upon not one island, but hundreds of islands in the Bahamas. Anchoring at island after island, the landing parties were instructed to search not for gold, but for some unusual fountain. The waters of each stream were tasted and drunk, but with no evident effects. On Easter Sunday, Casca de Flores, by its Spanish name, a long coastline, was sighted. Ponce de Leon called the island Florida. Sailing along the coast and landing again and again, he and his men searched the jungled forests and drank the waters of endless springs, but none seemed to work the expected miracle. The mission's failure appears to have hardly dampened the conviction that the fountain was undoubtedly there. It only had to be discovered. More Indians were questioned. Some seemed unusually young for the old ages claimed by them. Others repeated legends that confirmed the existence of the fountain. One such legend relates that when Olaubis, he who sits above, was about to create mankind, he sent 2 emissaries to Earth to construct a ladder.
Yo, what's up, man? I did not see the update. I'm sorry, man. I'll check it now. I'll check it now, my dude. After this run.
A pool of pure drinking waters. At the summit, they were
sorry,
to create
buddy.
2 springs, one for drinking and the other for bathing.
Wow, I can't believe I actually
When a
uploaded.
man or woman grows old,
Sorry,
said
man.
Olaubis,
What's up, dude?
let him or her
Alright.
climb up to this summit and drink and bathe,
Sorry, man.
whereupon his youth shall be restored. The conviction that the fountain existed somewhere
Wow,
on
look
the
at that,
islands
man.
was so
Fizz.
strong that in 1514, the year after Ponce de Leon's unfruitful mission, Peter Martyr, in his second decade,
Nice, man.
informed
I love
Pope
it.
Leo X
Heater,
as
AC.
follows. At a distance of 325 leagues from Hispaniola, they tell,
Awesome, man. I
there
like
is
it,
an
dude.
island
Chalk.
called Boyuca, alias
Gravel.
Ananio, which, according to those who explored its interior, has such an extraordinary
How do you do
fountain
2
that
at the same
drinking of its
time?
waters rejuvenates the old. And let your holiness not think this to be said lightly or rashly, for they have spread word of this as the truth throughout the court, so formally that the whole people, not few of whom are from among those
Nice, the river's
with
nice. I like the
wisdom
river
or
one.
fortune distinguished from the common people, hold it to be true.
I like it,
Ponce
buddy.
de Leon, undaunted,
Congrats, man.
concluded after some additional research that what he had to look for was a spring in conjunction with a river, the two possibly connected by a hidden underground tunnel. If the fountain was on an island, was its source a river in Florida? In 1521, the Spanish crown sent Ponce de Leon on a renewed search, this time focusing on Florida. There can be no doubt regarding the true purpose of his mission. Writing only a few decades later, the Spanish historian Antonio de Herrera y Tordesillas stated thus in his Historia General de las Indias: he, Ponce de Leon, went seeking that sacred fountain, so renowned among the Indians, as well as the river whose waters rejuvenated the aged. He was intent on finding the spring of Bimini and the river in Florida, of which the Indians of Cuba and Hispaniola affirmed that old persons bathing themselves in them became young again. Instead of eternal youth, Ponce de Leon found death by an Indian arrow. And although the individual search for a potion or lotion that can postpone the last day may never end, the organized search under a royal decree did come to an end.
What's up, dude? How you doing, man? Thanks for being, man.
Was the search futile to begin with? Were Ferdinand and Isabel and Ponce de Leon and the men who sailed and died in search of the fountain all fools, childishly believing in some primitive fairy tales? Not the way they saw it. The Holy Scriptures, pagan beliefs, and the documented tale of great travelers all combined to affirm that there was indeed a place whose waters or fruits' nectars could bestow immortality by keeping one forever young. There were still current olden tales left from the times when the Celts were in the peninsula of a secret place, a secret fountain, a secret fruit or herb whose finder shall be redeemed of death. There was the goddess Yvonne, who lived by a sacred brook and who kept magical apples in her coffer. When the gods grew old, they would come to her to eat of the apples, whereupon they turned young again. Indeed, Yvonne meant again young, and the apples that she guarded were called the elixir of the gods. Was this an echo of the legend of Heracles, Hercules, and his 12 labors? A priestess of the god Apollo,
that's cool.
predicting his travails in an oracle, had also assured him, when this shall be done, thou shalt become one of the immortals.
Oh, now we're talking.
To achieve this,
now we're talking, Toad.
Was to seize and
now
bring
we're
back
talking,
from
dude.
Hesperides the divine golden apples. The Hesperides, daughters of the evening land, resided at the ends of earth.
Now we're
Had
talking,
not the
bro.
Greeks and then the Romans left behind them tales of mortals immortalized. The god Apollo anointed the body of Sarpedon so that he lived the life of several generations of men. The goddess Aphrodite granted to Phaon a magic potion. Anointing himself with it, he turned into a
Now we're
beautiful
fucking
youth
talking,
who
dude.
awakened love in the hearts
Yes.
of all the women of Lesbos.
Yes.
And the child Demophon,
I love it,
anointed
man.
with ambrosia by the goddess
It makes
Demeter,
it just makes
would surely
it
have
so much
become
better,
immortal
man.
were not
Now
his
it's
mother,
legitimate. Yeah,
ignorant
buddy.
of Demeter's identity,
Heck yeah, man.
to snatch him away from the
Ooh,
goddess.
yeah.
There was
Insane.
the tale of Tantalus, who had become immortal by eating at the gods' table and stealing their nectar and ambrosia. But having killed his son to serve his flesh as food for the gods,
Yeah,
he
man.
was punished by being banished to the land of luscious fruits and waters, eternally out of his reach. The god Hermes restored the butchered son to life.
100%, man. And they're
On
all
the other
unique.
hand,
The
Odysseus
combinations are unique
offered
and everything.
immortality by the nymph
It's great,
Calypso.
dude.
If only he would stay with her forever, forsook immortality for a chance to return to his home and wife. And was there not the tale of Glaucus, a mortal, an ordinary fisherman who became a
You could have
sea
even a
god? One
user
day he observed that a fish that he had caught,
recommended
coming in touch with a
combination
bird,
of sounds.
came back to life.
Then they can like
and
name
moved
the
back into
combination
the
and
water.
upload it.
Taking
And other
the
people
herb
can
into
vote
his
on the
mouth,
combination.
Glaucus jumped into the
If
water
they
at
like it or
exact
not. I
same
mean,
spot,
depends how much
whereupon the sea gods
user interaction you want,
Okeanos
but
and Tethys admitted him to their circle and transformed him into a deity. The year 1492, in which Columbus set sail
dude, you're
from
learning a
Spain,
lot about apps, man.
was also the year in which the
programming.
Muslim occupation of the Iberian Peninsula ended with the surrender of the Moors at Granada. Throughout the nearly 8 centuries of Muslim and Christian contention over the peninsula, the interaction of the two cultures was immense, and the tale in the Quran, the Muslim holy book of the fish and the fountain of life, was known to Moor and Catholic
No, man,
alike.
it's worth it.
The fact that the tale was almost identical to the Greek legend of Glaucus the fisherman was taken as confirmation of its authenticity. It was one of the reasons for seeking the legendary fountain in India, the land which Columbus had set out to reach, and which he thought he had reached. The segment in the Quran which contains the tale is the 18th surah. It relates the exploration of various mysteries by Moses, the biblical hero of the Israelite exodus from Egypt. While Moses was being groomed for his new calling as a messenger of God, he was to be instructed in such knowledge as he still lacked by a mysterious servant of God. Accompanied by only one attendant, Moses was to go find this enigmatic teacher with the aid of a single clue. He was to take with him a dried fish. The place where the fish would jump and disappear would be the place where he would meet the teacher. After much searching in vain, the attendant of Moses suggested that they stop and give up the search. But Moses persisted, saying that he would not give up until they reached the junction of the two streams. Unnoticed by them, it was there that the miracle happened. But when they reached the junction, they forgot about their fish, which took its course through the stream as in a tunnel. After journeying further, Moses said to his attendant, "Bring us our early meal." But the attendant replied that the fish was gone. When we betook ourselves to the rock, sawest thou what had happened? I did indeed forget about the fish. Satan made me forget to tell you about it. It took its course through the stream in a marvelous way. And Moses said, "That was what we were seeking after." The tale in the Quran of the dried fish that came to life and swam back to the sea through a tunnel went beyond the parallel Greek tale by relating itself not to a simple
Dude, this video is an 11-hour video about the entire history of the Anunnaki and like Sumerian mythology. It's fucking amazing.
Of the location of the waters of life, waters that
11
could be
freaking hours
through the medium of the resurrection of a dead fish. The original text and a translation can be found in the bonus PDF under Figure 1. As devout Christians, the King of Spain must have accepted
Bimini,
literally the vision
Bahamas,
described in the Book of Revelation.
Search for the Fountain of Eden by Ponce de Leon.
Clear as crystal,
because there is a fountain there that they say is a fountain of youth, but it's hard to get to. You can't just like kind of walk through. You need to get a boat and go around to it. It's not hard, but you need a boat.
Manner of fruit. They must have believed in the book's promise.
Get the fuck out of here.
I will give unto him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life. I will give to eat of the tree of life, which is the midst of the paradise of God. And could they not be aware of the words of the biblical psalmist? Thou givest them to drink of thy stream of eternities, for with thee is the fountain of life. There could thus be no doubt, as attested by the holiest scriptures, that the fountain of life, or the stream of eternity, did exist. The only problem was where and how to find it. The 18th surah of the Quran seemed to offer some important clues.
So this video is amazing.
It goes on to relate the three paradoxes of life that Moses was shown once he located the servant of God. Then the same section of the Quran continues to describe three other episodes. First, about a visit to a land where the sun sets, then to a land where the sun rises, that is, in the east, and finally to a land beyond the second land where the mythical people of Gog and Magog, the biblical contenders at the end of days, were causing untold mischief on earth. To put an end to this trouble, the hero of the tale, here named Dual-Qarnayn, possessor of the two horns, filled up the pass between two steep mountains with blocks of iron and poured over them molten lead, creating such an awesome barrier that even the mighty Gog and Magog were powerless to scale it. Separated, the two could cause no more hardship on earth. The word
fucking hilarious.
in Arabic, as in
Wouldn't it be
Hebrew,
40 factorial?
means both double horns and double
40
rays.
times 39
The
times
three additional
38 times
episodes
37
following
times
immediately
36.
after the tale of the mysteries of Moses, thus appear to retain as their
That's
hero
insane, bro.
Moses, who could well have been nicknamed Dual-Qarnayn,
Yeah.
because his face was with rays, radiating.
See, I'm just as smart as
after he had come down
ChatGPT.
from Mount Sinai, where he had met the Lord face
I'm
to
sure.
face. Yet popular medieval beliefs
Well,
attributed the
ChatGPT is
alphabet
based
and
on
the
human
journeys to
knowledge.
the three lands
So
to
humans will always
Alexander
be
the Great,
smarter as a
the
collective.
Macedonian king who in the 4th century BC conquered most of the ancient world, reaching as far as India. This popular belief,
That's crazy,
interchanging
dude.
Moses and Alexander,
Million,
stemmed
billion,
from
trillion. You have a
traditions concerning
trillion.
the conquests and
You
adventures
can
of
advertise it
Alexander the
as
Great.
a
These
trillion different
included not only the
permutations.
feat
Don't
of
advertise
land
like
of
that,
Gog
but I
and
mean, you could.
Magog, but also an identical episode of a dry, dead fish that came back to life when Alexander and his cook had found the fountain of life. The reports concerning Alexander's adventures that were current in Europe and the Near East
Dude,
in
it made your
medieval
apple
times
way better now.
were based upon the supposed
Like, now we
writings
can
of the Greek
combine them.
historian Callisthenes of Olympus. He was appointed by Alexander to record the exploits, triumphs, and adventures of his Asiatic expedition, but he died in prison, having offended Alexander,
Should
and
play
his
it on my
writings have
stream.
mysteriously perished.
In the background on my
Centuries
PC.
later, however,
Thing is, I
there
have on my
began to
app on my
circulate
phone.
in Europe a Latin
But if I imagine I
text
stream it through the
purporting to be a
TV and I play the
translation of the
ASMR
lost
sound
original
and I
writings
advertise the
of
sounds being played.
Callisthenes. Scholars speak of this
hilarious.
text as
In a good way.
pseudo-Callisthenes. For many centuries, it was
Get the fuck
believed
out of here. Did you see
that
that
the
shot?
many translations of the
guys
exploits of
see that
Alexander
headshot?
that were current in Europe and the Middle East all stemmed from this
Because
Latin
it helps with the
pseudo-Callisthenes.
Japanese, but whatever.
But it was later discovered that other parallel versions existed in many languages, including Hebrew, Arabic, Persian,
Mood light.
Syriac, Armenian, and Ethiopic, as well as at least 3 versions in Greek. The various versions, some tracing their origins to Alexandria of the 2nd century BC,
What's the mood?
differ
Angry?
here and there, but by and large, their overwhelming similarities do indicate a common source. Perhaps the writings of Callisthenes after all, or,
Yeah,
as is
Aztec,
sometimes claimed, copies of Alexander's letters to his mother Olympias and to his teacher Aristotle. The miraculous adventures with which we are concerned began after Alexander completed the conquest of Egypt. From the texts, it is neither clear
That
in
is the
which
mood.
direction
That
Alexander
is.
set his course, nor is it certain that the episodes are arranged in an accurate chronological or geographical order. One of the very first episodes, however, may explain the popular confusion between Alexander
that's okay, man.
and Moses. Apparently, Alexander attempted to leave Egypt, as Moses did, by parting the waters and getting his followers to cross the sea on foot. Reaching the sea, Alexander decided to part it by building in its midst a wall of molten lead, and his masons continued to pour lead and molten matter into the water until the structure rose above its surface. Then he built upon it a tower and a pillar, upon which he carved his own figure, having 2 horns upon his head. And he wrote upon the monument, "Whosoever hath come into this place, and would sail over the sea, let him know that I have shut it up." Having thus shut out the waters, Alexander and his men began to cross the sea. As a precaution, however, they sent ahead some
Thanks for being here,
prisoners.
man.
But as they
Appreciate it.
reached the tower in the midst of the waters, the waves of the sea leapt up upon them, the prisoners, and the sea swallowed them up, and they all perished. When the 2-horned one saw this, he was afraid of the sea with a mighty fear, and gave up the attempt to emulate Moses. Eager, however, to discover the darkness on the other side of the sea, Alexander made
what
several
fuck?
detours, during which he purportedly visited the sources of the river Euphrates and of the river Tigris, studying there the secrets of the heavens and the stars and the planets. Leaving his troops behind, Alexander returned toward the land of darkness, reaching a mountain named Mushis at the edge of the desert. After several days of marching, he saw a straight path which had no wall, and it had no high and no place in it. He left his few trusted companions and proceeded alone. After a journey of 12 days and 12 nights,
Fucking brutal.
he perceived the radiance of an angel. But as he drew nearer, the angel was a flaming fire. Alexander realized that he had reached the mountain from which the whole world is surrounded. The angel was
Actually,
no
more
less
than 3
puzzled
bullets
than
there to
Alexander.
lure the guards.
"Who art thou, and for what reason art thou here, O mortal?" the angel asked, and wondered how Alexander had managed to penetrate into this darkness, which no other man hath been able to do. To which Alexander replied that God himself had guided him and gave him strength to have arrived in this place, which is paradise. To convince the reader that paradise, rather than hell, was reachable through underground passages, the ancient author then introduced a long discourse between the angel and Alexander on matters of God and man. The angel then urged Alexander to return to his friends, but Alexander persisted in seeking answers to the mysteries of heaven and earth, God and men. In the end, Alexander said that he would leave only if he were granted something that no man had ever obtained before. Complying, the angel said unto him, I will tell thee something whereby thou mayest live and not die. The two-horned said, Say on. And the angel said unto him, In the land of Arabia, God hath set the blackness of solid darkness, wherein is hidden the treasury of this knowledge. There too is the fountain of water, which is called the water of life, and whosoever drinketh therefrom, if it be but a single drop, shall never die. The angel attributed other magical powers to these waters of life, such as the power of flying through the heavens, even as the angels fly. Needing no further prompting, Alexander anxiously inquired, In which quarter of the earth is this fountain of water situated? Ask those men who are heirs to the knowledge thereof, was the angel's enigmatic answer. Then the angel gave Alexander a cluster of grapes, whereby to feed his troops. Returning to his companions, Alexander told his colleagues of his adventure, and gave them each a grape. But as he plucked off from the cluster, another grew in its place. And so did one cluster feed all the soldiers and their beasts.
Come on, like what?
Alexander then began to make inquiries of all the learned men he could find. He asked the sages, Have you ever read in your books that God hath a place
how did I not pick up any guns?
Of which knowledge is hidden, and that the fountain, which is called the fountain of life, is situated therein? The Greek versions have him search the ends of earth.
The guard blew up his friend with a grenade.
The Ethiopic version suggests that the sage was right there among his troops. His name was Matun, and he knew the ancient writings. The place, he said, lieth nigh unto the sun when it rises on the right side. Scarcely more informed by such riddles, Alexander put himself in the hands of his guide. They again went into a place of darkness. After journeying for a long time, Alexander got tired and sent Matun ahead by himself to find the right path. To help him see in the darkness, Alexander gave him a stone, which was given him earlier under miraculous circumstances by an ancient king who was living among the gods. A stone which was brought out of paradise by Adam when he left it, and which was heavier than any other substance on earth. Matun, though careful to follow the path, eventually lost his way. He then produced the magical stone and put it down. When it touched the ground, it emitted light. By the light, Matun saw a well. He was not yet aware that he had chanced upon the fountain of life. The Ethiopic version describes what ensued. Now, he had with him a dried fish, and being exceedingly hungry, he went down with it to the water, that he might wash it therein and make it ready for cooking. But behold, as soon as the fish touched the water, it swam away. When Matun saw this, he stripped his clothes and went down into the water after the fish, and found it to be alive in the water. Realizing that this was the well of the water of life, Matun washed himself in the waters and drank thereof. When he had come up from the well, he was no longer hungry, nor did he have any worldly care, for he had become El Kadir, the evergreen, the one who was forever young. Returning to the encampment, he said nothing of his discovery to Alexander, whom the Ethiopic version calls he of the two horns. Then Alexander himself resumed the search, groping for the right way in the darkness. Suddenly, he saw the stone, left behind by Matun, shining in the darkness, and now it had two eyes, which sent forth rays of light. Realizing that he had found the right path, Alexander rushed ahead, but was stopped by a voice which admonished him for his ever-increasing ambitions, and prophesied that instead of attaining eternal life, he would soon bite the dust. Terrified, Alexander returned to his companions and his troops, giving up the search. According to some versions, it was a bird with human features who spoke to Alexander and made him turn back when he reached a place inlaid with sapphires and emeralds and jacinths. In Alexander's purported letter to his mother, there were 2 birdmen who blocked his way. In the Greek version of Pseudo-Callisthenes, it was Andreas, the cook of Alexander, who took the dried fish to wash it in a fountain, whose waters flashed with lightnings. As the fish touched the water, it became alive and slipped out of the cook's hands. Realizing what he had found, the cook drank of the waters and took some in a silver bowl, but told no one of his discovery. When Alexander, in this version he was accompanied by 360 men, continued their search, they reached a place that shined, though there were neither sun nor moon, nor stars to be seen. The way was blocked by 2 birds with human features. "Go back," one of them ordered Alexander, "for the land on which you stand belongs to God alone. Go back, O wretched one, for in the land of the blessed you cannot set foot." Shuddering with fear, Alexander and his men turned back. But before they left the place, they took as souvenirs some of its soil and stones. After several days marching, they came out of the land of everlasting night. And when they reached light, they saw that the soil and stones
that's why I'm going kind of
they picked
slow.
up were in fact pearls, precious stones, and nuggets of gold. Only then did the cook tell Alexander of the fish that came to life, but still kept it a secret that he himself had drunk of the waters and that he had kept some of it. Alexander was furious and hit him, then banished him from the camp. But the cook wished not to leave alone, for he had fallen in love with a daughter of Alexander. So he revealed his secret to her and gave her to drink of the waters. When Alexander found that out, he banished her too. "You have become a godly being, having become immortal," he told her. "Therefore," he said, "you cannot live among men. Go live in the land of the blessed." And as for the cook, him Alexander threw into the sea with a stone around his neck. But instead of drowning, the cook became the sea demon Andrantic. And thus, we are told, ends the tale of the cook and the maiden. To the learned advisors of Europe's medieval kings and queens, the various versions only serve to confirm both the antiquity and the authenticity of the legend of Alexander and the Fountain of Life. But where, oh where, were these magical waters located? Were they indeed across the border of Egypt, in the Sinai Peninsula, the arena of the activities of Moses? Were they close to the area where the Euphrates and Tigris rivers began to flow, somewhere north of Syria? Did Alexander go to the ends of Earth, India, to find the fountain? Or did he embark on those additional conquests after he was turned back from it? As the medieval scholars strove to unravel the puzzle, new works on the subject from Christian sources began to shape a consensus in favor of India. A Latin composition named Alexander Magni Inter ad Paradisum, a Syriac homily of Alexander by Bishop Jacob of Sarid, the recension of Josephus in Armenian, complete with the tale of the tumult, the man-like birds, the magical stone, placed the land of darkness, or the mountains of darkness, at the ends of earth. There, some of these writings said, Alexander took a boat ride on the Ganges River, which was none other than the Pishan River of Paradise. There in India, or on an island offshore, did Alexander reach the gates of paradise. As these conclusions were taking shape in Europe of the Middle Ages, new light was shed on the subject from a wholly unexpected source. In the year 1145, the German bishop Otto of Freising reported in his Chronicon a most astonishing epistle. The Pope, he reported, had received a letter from a Christian ruler of India, whose existence had been totally unknown until then. And that king had affirmed in his letter that the river...
Did you see that run, Toad? Did you just see that run? Did you just see that run, Toad?
Named as the intermediary through whom the Pope
what? How? What? Guys! What? Guys, I'm so fucking pissed off. I'm so fucking pissed off.
Or being a priest, Prester John.
Guys, that's hilarious. That's the funniest shit I've ever seen.
Had visited Christ the child. He defeated the Muslim kings of Persia and formed a thriving Christian kingdom in lands called the ends of earth. Nowadays, some scholars consider the whole affair to have been a forgery for propaganda purposes. Others believe that the reports which reached the Pope were distortions of events that were really happening.
I'm just so upset. I'm just so sad. I'm just so like, what does this even mean? Oh my god. Oh my god, man.
At Edessa, 1144.
That's too funny. I'm saving that run for sure.
Storm the gates of the Muslim
wow.
And in 1141 defeated Sultan Sanjar. When the news reached the Mediterranean coastal cities, it was forwarded to the Pope in the garb of a Christian king.
I guess the extra pause really is that slow, man.
If the search
and the drone juke. My exhaust fade was pretty slow too.
It apparently was among the reasons for the following ones. For no sooner had Bishop Otto reported the existence of
wow.
John and of the River of Paradise in his realm, then the Pope issued a formal call
man.
for the resumption
so
of the
I don't think
later,
that's so. Passing away those guards
Germany,
isn't a fast
accompanied
enough
by other
viable
rulers and
option.
many
It looks
nobles,
like.
launched the Second Crusade. As the fortunes of the Crusaders rose and fell, Europe was swept anew by word from Prester John and his promises of aid. According to chroniclers of those days, Prester John sent in 1165
I feel like we gotta watch that run. We gotta watch it back, man. We gotta.
And to lesser kings, in which he declared his definite intention to come to the Holy Land with his armies. Again, his realm was described in glowing terms, as befits the place where the River of Paradise, indeed the gates of paradise, were situated. The promised help never came. The way from Europe to India was not breached open. By the end of the 13th century, the Crusades were over, ending in final defeat.
Alright, I'm gonna pull up the video. I'm gonna pull it up.
But even as the Crusaders were advancing and retreating, the fervent belief in the existence of the waters of paradise in India scriptures tell us when immortality was within the grasp of mankind. A golden age it was when man lived with his creators. Until then, the gates of Jacob, Alexander goes in the and therefore and gave the light land on which in this version he was accompanied by 360 men, continued their search. They reached a place that shined, though there were neither sun nor moon, nor stars to be seen. The way was blocked by two birds with human features. Go back, one of them ordered Alexander, for the land on which you stand belongs to God alone. Go back, O wretched one, for in the land of the blessed you cannot set foot. Shuddering with fear, Alexander and his men turned back. But before they left the place, they took as souvenirs some of its soil and stones. After several days marching, they came out of the land of everlasting night. And when they reached light, they saw that the soil and stones
that's why I'm going kind of
they picked
slow.
up were in fact pearls, precious stones, and nuggets of gold. Only then did the cook tell Alexander of the fish that came to life, but still kept it a secret that he himself had drunk of the waters, and that he had kept some of it. Alexander was furious and hit him, then banished him from the camp. But the cook wished not to leave alone, for he had fallen in love with the daughter of Alexander. So he revealed his secret to her and gave her to drink of the waters. When Alexander found that out, he banished her too. You have become a godly being, having become immortal, he told her. Therefore he said, you cannot live among men. Go live in the land of the blessed. And as for the cook, him Alexander threw into the sea with a stone around his neck. But instead of drowning, the cook became the sea demon Andrantic. And thus, we are told, ends the tale of the cook and the maiden. To the learned advisors of Europe's medieval kings and queens, the various versions only serve to confirm both the antiquity and the authenticity of the legend of Alexander and the Fountain of Life. But where, oh where, were these magical waters located? Were they indeed across the border of Egypt, in the Sinai Peninsula, the arena of the activities of Moses? Were they close to the area where the Euphrates and Tigris rivers began to flow, somewhere north of Syria? Did Alexander go to the ends of Earth, India, to find the fountain? Or did he embark on those additional conquests after he was turned back from it? As the medieval scholars strove to unravel the puzzle, new works on the subject from Christian sources began to shape a consensus in favor of India. A Latin composition named Alexander Magni Inter ad Paradisum, a Syriac homily of Alexander by Bishop Jacob of Sarid, the recension of Josephus in Armenian, complete with the tale of the tumult, the man-like birds, the magical stone, placed the land of darkness, or the mountains of darkness, at the ends of earth. There, some of these writings said, Alexander took a boat ride on the Ganges River, which was none other than the Pishan River of Paradise. There in India, or on an island offshore, did Alexander reach the gates of paradise. As these conclusions were taking shape in Europe of the Middle Ages, new light was shed on the subject from a wholly unexpected source. In the year 1145, the German bishop Otto of Freising reported in his Chronicon a most astonishing epistle. The Pope, he reported, had received a letter from a Christian ruler of India, whose existence had been totally unknown until then. And that king had affirmed in his letter that the river...
Did you see that run, Toad? Did you just see that run? Did you just see that run, Toad?
Named as the intermediary through whom the Pope
what? How? What? Guys! What? Guys, I'm so fucking pissed off. I'm so fucking pissed off.
Or being a priest, Prester John.
Guys, that's hilarious. That's the funniest shit I've ever seen.
Had visited Christ the child. He defeated the Muslim kings of Persia and formed a thriving Christian kingdom and lands.
On the miracle surviving, that was the only
propaganda purposes.
The miracle surviving without body armor. It was a 145. I'm just so upset. I'm just so sad. I'm just so like. What does this even mean? Oh my god. Oh my god, man.
At Edessa in 1144. Kept growing and spreading. Before the 12th century was over, a new and popular version of the exploits of Alexander the Great made its way into the encampments and town squares. Called the Romance of Alexander, it was, as is now known,
I just feel so. I feel so foolish, man. I feel so foolish.
Composition on the Latin version of Pseudo Callisthenes and other biographies of the Macedonian hero then available.
Like, I just feel so.
The knights, the warriors, the townspeople in the drinking halls.
Thanks for.
Cared not who the authors were, for in language they could understand, it vividly drew for them visions of Alexander's adventures in strange lands. Among these was the tale of the three wondrous fountains. One rejuvenated the old, the second granted immortality, the third resurrected the dead. The three fountains, the romance explained, were located in different lands, issuing as they were from the Tigris and Euphrates rivers in Western Asia the Nile in Africa, and the Ganges River in India. These were the 4 rivers of paradise, and though they flowed in different lands, they all arose from a single source, from the Garden of Eden, just as the Bible had stated all along.
I need to
It
take
was
a
the
walk or
fountain of
something. I'll be back in like a sec. I'm not go outside. I'm just gonna take like a minute or two, kind of stroll.
It recounted as fact that 56 aged companions of Alexander recovered the complexion of 30 years old after drinking from the fountain of youth. As translations of the romance carried the tale far and wide, the versions became increasingly specific on this point, not only the appearance, but also the manhood and virility of the aged soldiers were restored to youthfulness.
Yeah.
But how does one get to this fountain if the route to India is blocked by the
super
heathen
safe.
Muslims?
You could say it took
On
super
and off,
safe,
the
no
popes
body armor
attempted to
strat,
communicate with the
and it still is
enigmatic
too
Prester
slow.
John, the
That's even a
illustrious
thing.
and magnificent king of the Indies, and beloved son of Christ. In 1245, Pope Innocent IV
Like, what does it
dispatched
even
the
mean?
friar
It means
Giovanni
I have to
da
just
Pian
keep
del
doing the same
Carpini
strat, I
via
guess.
southern Russia to
The-
the Mongol
the-
ruler,
the
Khan,
natural
believing the
stuff.
Mongols to be Nestorians.
Because I can't do. I mean, if I have a better force stuck, but
to be Prester John.
I don't even know,
In
man.
1254, the Armenian ruler priest Hathan traveled in disguise through eastern Turkey to the camp of the Mongol chieftain in southern Russia. The record of his adventurous travels mentioned that his way took him via the narrow pass on the shores of the Caspian Sea called the Iron Gates, and the speculation that his route resembled that of Alexander the Great, who had poured molten iron to close a mountain pass, only served to suggest that the ends of earth, the gates of paradise, could indeed be so reached. These and other papal and royal emissaries were soon joined by private adventurers, such as the brothers Niccolo and Maffeo Polo, and the former's son Marco Polo, and the German knight William of Bodensee, all searching for the kingdom of Prester John. While their travelogues kept up the interest of church and courts, it was once again the fate of a popular literary work to rekindle mass interest. Its author introduced himself as I, John Mondeville, knight, born in the town of St. Albans in England, who passed the sea in the year of our Lord Jesus 1322. Writing at the end of his travels 34 years later, Sir John explained that he had therein set down the way to the Holy Land and to Jerusalem, as also to the lands of the great Cain and of Prester John, to Indy and divers other countries, together with many and strange marvels therein. In the 27th chapter, captioned of the Royal Estate of Prester John, the book, The Voyages and Travels of Sir John Mondeville, Knight, states, "This emperor, Prester John, possesses very extensive territory, and has many noble cities and good towns in his realm, and many great and large isles, for all the country of India is divided into isles, by the great floods that come from paradise. And this land is full, good, and rich. In the land of Prester John are many divers things, and many precious stones, so great and so large, that men make thereof plates, dishes, cups, etc." Sir John went on to describe the river of paradise. In his country is the sea, called the Gravelly Sea. 3 days from that sea are great mountains, out of which run a great river which comes from paradise, and it is full of precious stones, without a drop of water, and it runs through the desert on one side, so that it makes the Gravelly Sea where it ends. Beyond the river of paradise, there was a great isle, long and broad, called Misterac, that was a paradise on earth. It had the fairest garden that might be imagined, and therein were trees bearing all manner of fruits, all kinds of herbs of virtue and of good smell. This paradise, Sir John states, had marvelous pavilions and chambers, the purpose of which was diverse sexual enjoyment, all the work of a rich and devilish man. Having fired the imagination and greed of his readers with the tales of precious stones and other riches, Sir John now played on the men's sexual desires. The place, he wrote,
like a puzzle,
was filled
man.
with the fairest damsels that might be found under the age of 15 years,
guys.
and the fairest young striplings that men might get at that same age. And they were all clothed richly in clothes of gold. And he said that they were angels. And the devilish man had also caused to be made 3 fair and noble wells, all surrounded with stone of jasper and crystal, diapered with gold, and set with precious stones and great orient pearls. And he had made a conduit under the earth, so that the 3 wells, at his will, should run one with milk, another with wine, and another with honey. And that place he called Paradise. To that place the crafty man
Okay, so I
lured
think
good
pausing
knights,
twice is
hardy
way
and
too
noble,
slow.
And after entertaining
way
them,
too slow.
persuaded them to go and kill his enemies, telling them that they should not fear being
I
slain.
can't pause
for
again.
should they die, they would be resurrected and rejuvenated. After their death, they should come to his paradise, and they should be of the age of the damsels, and they should play with them. And after that he would put them in a fairer paradise, where they should see the God of nature visibly in his majesty and bliss. But that, said John Mondeville, was not the real paradise of biblical renown. That one, he said in chapter 30, lay beyond the isles and lands which Alexander the Great had journeyed through. The route to it led farther east, toward 2 isles rich in gold and silver mines, where the Red Sea separates from the Ocean Sea. And beyond that land and isles and deserts of Prester John's lordship, in going straight toward the east, men find nothing but mountains and great rocks. And there is the dark region, where no man can see, neither by day nor night. And that desert and that place of darkness lasts from this coast unto terrestrial paradise, where Adam, our first father, and Eve were put. It was from there that the waters of paradise flowed, and in the highest place of paradise, exactly in the middle, is a well that casts out the 4 streams, which run by diverse lands, of which the first is called Pison, or Ganges, that runs through India, or Inlak, in which river are many precious stones, and much lignum aloes, and much sand of gold. And the other river is called Nile, or Gyges, which goes through Ethiopia and after through Egypt. And the other is called Tigris, which runs by Assyria and by Armenia the Great. And the other is called Euphrates, which runs through Media, Armenia, and Persia. Confessing that he himself had not reached this biblical Garden of Eden, John Mondeville explained, no mortal man may approach to that place without the special grace of God, so that of that place I can tell you no more. In spite of this admission, the many versions and many languages that flowed from the English original maintained that the knight had stated, I, John de Mondeville, saw that fountain and drank 3 times of that water with my companion, and since I drank, I feel well. The fact that in the English version, Mondeville complained that he was sick with rheumatic gout and near the end of his days mattered not to the many who were thrilled by the marvelous tales. Nor did it matter then that scholars nowadays believe that Sir John Mondeville Knight may in fact have been a French doctor who had never traveled, but very skillfully put together a travel log from the writings of others who did take the risk and trouble of journeying far and away. Writing about the visions that had motivated the exploration that led to the discovery of America, Angel Rosenblatt summed up the evidence thus. Along with the belief in the earthly paradise was associated another desire of a messianic or Faustic nature to find the fountain of eternal youth. All the Middle Ages had dreamed of it. In the new images of the lost paradise, the tree of life was converted into the fountain of life, and then into a river or spring of youth. The motivation was the conviction that the fountain of life came from India, a fountain that cured all ills and assured immortality. The fantastic John Mondeville had actually encountered it on his trip to India in the Christian kingdom of Prester John, To reach India and the waters that flow from paradise became a symbol of the eternal human desire for pleasure, youth, and happiness. With the land routes blocked by enemies, the Christian kingdoms of Europe sought a sea route to India. Under Henry the Navigator, the Kingdom of Portugal emerged in the middle of the 15th century as the leading power in the race to reach the Orient by sailing around Africa. In 1445, the Portuguese navigator Gyges reached the mouth of the Senegal River, and mindful of the voyage's purpose, reported that men say it comes from the Nile, being one of the most glorious rivers of earth, flowing from the Garden of Eden and the earthly paradise. Others followed, pushing to and around the Cape at the tip of the African continent. In 1499, Vasco da Gama and his fleet circumnavigated Africa and reached the cherished target, India. Yet the Portuguese, who had launched the
Dude, I
age of
can't actually
discovery,
believe that
failed to win the
happened.
race. Diligently studying
I'm
the
just so
ancient maps
shocked.
and all the writings of those who had ventured east, an Italian
The dream
seaman
becomes the
named
nightmare
Cristobal Colon
instantly.
concluded that by sailing west, he could reach India by a sea route much shorter than the eastern route
Oh
sought
my
by the
God.
Portuguese. Seeking a sponsor,
This
he
is
arrived
too
at the court
much,
of
man.
Ferdinand and Isabel. He had with him and took on his first voyage an annotated copy of the Latin version of Marco Polo's book. He could also point to the writings of John Mandeville, who explained a century and a half before Columbus that by going to the farthest east, one arrives at the west on account of the roundness of the earth, for our Lord God made the earth all around. In January 1492, Ferdinand and Isabel,
Even if it was like a
defeated the
141, it would have been a
Muslims, expelled them from the
cool,
Iberian
a
Peninsula.
cool
Was it
thing in
not a
history,
divine sign
right?
to Spain
It would have been
that what the
interesting,
Crusaders could
but
not
no,
achieve,
it was a
Spain
freaking
would? On
3
August 3rd of the
seconds
same year,
off
Columbus
my
sailed
TV,
under the
right?
Spanish flag
If it was like
to
even a
find a
141,
western
that
sea
was
route
just
to
kind of
India.
would be
On
the next
October
step
12th, he
forward,
sighted
right? It
land.
would have been a great
Until his
run
death in
for the history
1506,
books, but no.
He was sure that he had reached the islands which made up a great part of the legendary domain
God damn it.
of Prester John. 2 decades later, Ferdinand issued to Ponce de Leon the patent of discovery,
Dang nabbit.
instructing him to find without delay the rejuvenating waters. The Spaniards had thought that they were emulating Alexander the Great. Little did they know that they were following footsteps of far greater antiquity. The short life of Alexander the Macedonian, he died at age 33 in Babylon,
Yeah,
was
pausing
filled with
again
conquest,
and
adventure,
unpausing adds like
exploration,
at least
a
4
burning
seconds.
desire to reach the ends of earth, to unravel divine mysteries.
That's a good point.
It was
Adds
not
a
an
hell of a lot
aimless
of time.
search. Son of Queen Olympus,
Maybe not 4,
and
but
presumably of her husband, King Philip II,
3 seconds.
he was tutored by the philosopher Aristotle in all manner of ancient wisdom. So he witnessed quarreling and divorce between his parents, leading to the flight of his mother with the young Alexander. There was reconciliation, then murder. The assassination of Philip led to the crowning of Alexander when 20 years old. His early military expeditions brought him to Delphi, seat of the renowned oracle. There he heard the first of several prophecies predicting for him fame, but a very short life. Undaunted, Alexander set out, as the Spaniards did nearly 1800 years later, to find the waters of life. To do so, he had to open up the way to the east. It was from there that the gods had come, the great Zeus, who swam across the Mediterranean, from the Phoenician city of Tyre to the island of Crete. Aphrodite, who also came from across the Mediterranean via the island of Cyprus. Poseidon, who brought with him the horse from Asia Minor. Athena, who carried to Greece the olive tree from the lands of Western Asia. There, too, according to the Greek historians, whose writings Alexander studied, were the waters which kept one forever young. There was the history of Cambyses, son of the Persian king Cyrus, who went by way of Syria, Palestine, and the Sinai to attack Egypt. Defeating the Egyptians, he treated them cruelly and defiled the temple of their god, Ammon. Then he took into his heart to go south and attack the long-lived Ethiopians, Describing the events, Herodotus, writing a century before Alexander, said, "His spies went to Ethiopia under the pretense of carrying presents to the king, but in reality to take note of all they saw, and especially to observe whether there was really what is called the Table of the Sun in Ethiopia." Telling the Ethiopian king that 80 years was the longest term of man's life among the Persians, the spies, emissaries, questioned him regarding the rumored long life of the Ethiopians. Confirming this, the king led them to a fountain, wherein, when they had washed, they found their flesh all glossy and sleek, as if they had bathed in oil, and a scent came from the spring like that of violets. Returning to Cambyses, the spies described the water as so weak that nothing would float on it, neither wood nor any lighter substance, but all went to the bottom. And Herodotus noted the following conclusion: if the account of this fountain be true, it would be there the Ethiopians' constant use of the water from it, which makes them so long-lived. The tale of the Fountain of Youth in Ethiopia, and of the violation by the Persian Cambyses of the Temple of Ammon, had direct bearing on the history of Alexander. This concerned the rumors that he was not really the son of Philip, but the offspring of a union between his mother Olympias and the Egyptian god Ammon. The strained relationships between Philip and Olympias only served to confirm the suspicions. An image of Alexander can be found in the bonus PDF under Figure 3. As related in various versions of Pseudo-Callisthenes, the court of Philip was visited by an Egyptian pharaoh, whom the Greeks called Nectanebus. He was a master magician, a diviner, and he secretly seduced Olympias. Unbeknown to her at the time, it was in reality the god Ammon, who had come to her taking the guise of Nectanebus. So it was that when she bore Alexander, she gave birth to the son of a god. It was the very god whose temple the Persian Cambyses had desecrated. Defeating the Persian armies in Asia Minor, Alexander turned toward Egypt, expecting heavy resistance by the Persian viceroys who ruled Egypt. He was astonished to see that great land fall into his hands without any resistance, an omen, no doubt. Losing no time, Alexander went to the great oasis, seat of the oracle of Ammon. There the god himself, so legend says, confirmed Alexander's true parentage. Thus affirmed, the Egyptian priests deified him as a pharaoh. Thereby his desire to escape a mortal's fate became not a privilege, but a right. Henceforth Alexander was depicted on his coins as a horned Zeus Ammon. An image of the horned Zeus Ammon can be found in the bonus PDF under Figure 4. Alexander then went south to Karnak, the center of the worship of Ammon. There was more to the trip than met the eye. A venerated religious center since the 3rd millennium BC, Karnak was a conglomeration of temples, shrines, and monuments to Ammon, built by generations of pharaohs. One of the most impressive and colossal structures was the temple built by Queen Hatshepsut, more than 1,000 years before Alexander's time. And she too was said to have been a daughter of the god Ammon, conceived by a queen whom the god had visited in disguise. Whatever actually transpired there, no one really knows. The fact is that instead of leading his armies back east, toward the heartland of the Persian Empire, Alexander selected a small escort and a few companions for an expedition even farther south. His puzzled companions were led to believe that he was going on a pleasure trip, the pleasures of lovemaking. The uncharacteristic interlude was as incomprehensible to the historians of those days as to the generals of Alexander. Trying to rationalize, the recorders of Alexander's adventures described the woman he was about to visit as a femme fatale, one whose beauty no living man could praise sufficiently. She was Candace,
145. Damn it, man. That was so funny, man.
Reversing the tale
that was
of
really
Solomon
funny.
And the Queen of Sheba, In this instance, it was the king who traveled to the queen's land.
Oh my
For
God,
unbeknown
man.
to his companions, Alexander was really seeking not love, but the secret of immortality. After a pleasant stay, the queen agreed to reveal to Alexander as a parting gift the secret of the wonderful cave where the gods congregate. Following her directions, Alexander found the sacred place. He entered with a few soldiers and saw a starlit haze, and the rooftops were shining as if lit by stars. The external forms of the gods were physically manifest. A crowd was serving them in silence.
Fine.
At first, he, Alexander, was frightened and surprised, but he stayed to see what would happen, for he saw some reclining figures whose eyes were shining like beams of light. The sight of the reclining figures with eyes emitting beams of light made Alexander stop short. Were they too gods or deified mortals? He was then startled by a voice. One of the figures had spoken up, and there was one who said, "Glad greetings, Alexander. Do you know who I am?" And he, Alexander, said, "No, my lord." The other said, "I am Sesonchusis, the world-conquering king who has joined the ranks of the gods."
What?
Alexander was far from being surprised, as though he had encountered the very person he had searched for. His arrival apparently expected, Alexander was invited in to the creator and overseer of the entire universe. He went within and saw a fire-bright haze, and seated on a throne the god whom he had once seen worshipped by men of Rakotai, the lord Sorapis. In the Greek version, it was the god Dionysus. Alexander saw his chance to bring up the matter of his longevity. "Lord God," he said, "how many
Yo, what's up,
years
King
shall
Nick?
I
How you
live?"
doing, dude?
But there was no answer
How you
from
doing?
the
Welcome,
god.
welcome.
Then Sesonchusis sought to console Alexander, for the god's
King Nick
silence spoke for itself.
007.
"Though I myself
dude?
have joined the ranks of the gods," Sesonchusis said, "I was not as
Oh my
fortunate as
gosh.
you. For although I have conquered the whole world and subjugated so many peoples, nobody remembers my name. But you shall have great renown. You will have an immortal name even after death." In this manner he consoled Alexander. "You shall live upon dying, thus not dying, immortalized by a lasting reputation." Disappointed, Alexander left the caves and continued the journey to be made to seek the advice of other sages, to find an escape from a mortal's fate, to emulate others who before him did succeed in joining the immortal gods. According to one version, among those whom Alexander searched out and met was Enoch, the biblical patriarch from the days before the deluge, who was the great-grandfather of Noah. It was a place of mountains, where paradise, which is the land of the living, is situated, the abode where the saints dwell. Atop a mountain there was a glittering structure, from which there extended skyward a huge stairway made of 2,500 golden slabs. In a vast hall or cavern, Alexander saw golden figures, each standing in its niche, a golden altar, and two huge candlesticks measuring some 60 feet in height. Upon a couch nearby reclined the form of a man who was draped in a coverlet inlaid with gold and precious stones, and above it, worked in gold, were branches of a vine, having its cluster of grapes formed of jewels. The man suddenly spoke up, identifying himself as Enoch. "Do not pry into the mysteries of God," the voice warned Alexander. Heeding the warning, Alexander left to rejoin his troops, but not before receiving as a parting gift a bunch of grapes that miraculously were sufficient to feed his whole army. In yet another version, Alexander encountered not one but two men from the past, Enoch and the prophet Elijah, two who, according to biblical traditions, have never died. It happened when Alexander was traversing an uninhabited desert. Suddenly his horse was seized by a spirit which carried horse and rider aloft, bringing Alexander to a glittering tabernacle. Inside he saw the two men. Their faces were bright, their teeth whiter than milk. Their eyes shone brighter than the morning star. They were lofty of stature, of gracious look. Telling him who they were, they said that God hid them from death. They told him that the place was the city of the storehouse of life. from where the bright waters of life emanated. But before Alexander could find out more, or drink of the waters of life, a chariot of fire snatched him away, and he found himself back with his troops. According to Muslim tradition, the Prophet Muhammad was also carried heavenward 1,000 years later, riding his white horse.
No.
Was the episode of the Cave of the Gods, as the other episodes in the histories of Alexander, pure fiction?
No.
Or perhaps embellished tales?
At least let me
based on
see. Come
historical
on,
fact?
why?
Was there a queen
That was
Candace,
so fast.
a royal city named Shamar, a world conqueror named Sessanchusis? In truth, the names meant little to students of antiquity until relatively recently. If these were names of Egyptian royal personages or of a mystical province of Egypt, they were as obscured by time as the monuments were obscured by the encroaching sands. Rising above the sands, the pyramids and the Sphinx only broadened the enigma. The hieroglyphic picture words, undecipherable, only confirmed that there were secrets
Tragic.
not to be unlocked. The tales from antiquity, passed on via the Greeks and Romans, dissolved into legends. Eventually, they faded into obscurity. It was only when Napoleon conquered Egypt in 1798 that Europe began to rediscover Egypt. Accompanying Napoleon's troops were groups of serious scholars who began to remove the sands and raise the curtain of forgetfulness. Then, near the village of Rosetta, a stone tablet was found bearing the same inscription in 3 languages. The key was found to unlock the language and inscriptions of ancient Egypt, its records of pharaonic feats, the glorification of its gods. In the 1820s, European explorers penetrating southward into the Sudan reported the existence of ancient monuments, including sharp-angled pyramids, at a site on the Nile River called Meroe.
Wow, that was
A
lucky.
Royal Prussian expedition uncovered impressive archaeological remains during excavations in the years 1842 to 1844. Between 1912 and 1914, others uncovered sacred sites. The hieroglyphic inscriptions indicated one of them was called the Sun Temple, perhaps the very place where the spies of
fuck off.
Cambyses observed the Table of the Sun. Further excavations in this century, the piecing together of archaeological signs, and the continued decipherment of the inscriptions have established that there indeed existed in that land a Nubian kingdom in the first millennium BC. It was the biblical land of Cush. There indeed was a Queen Candace. The hieroglyphic inscriptions revealed that at the very beginning of the Nubian kingdom, it was ruled by a wise and benevolent queen. Her name was Candace. Therefore, whenever a woman ascended the throne, which was not infrequent, she adopted the name as a symbol of great queenship. And farther south of Meroe, within this kingdom's domain, there was a city named Sennar, possibly the Shamar referred to in the Alexander tale. An image of Candace can be found in the bonus PDF under Figure 5.
It's not fast.
And what about Sessanchusis? It is told in the Ethiopic version of Pseudo-Callisthenes that journeying to, or from Egypt, Alexander and his men passed by a lake swarming with crocodiles. There an earlier ruler had built a way to cross the lake, and behold, there was a building upon the shore of the lake, and above the building was a heathen altar, upon which was written, "I am Kosh, the king of the world, the conqueror who crossed this lake."
What?
Who was this world conqueror Kosh, namely the king who ruled over Cush, or Nubia? In the Greek version of this tale, the conqueror who had commemorated his crossing of the lake, described as part of the waters of the Red Sea, was named Sessanchusis. So Sessanchusis and Kosh were one and the same ruler, a pharaoh who had ruled both Egypt and Nubia. Nubian monuments depicted such a ruler as he receives from a shiny god the fruit of life, shaped like date palms. A depiction of this exchange can be found in the bonus PDF under Figure 6. Egyptian records do speak of a great pharaoh who, early in the 2nd millennium BC, was indeed a world conqueror. His name was Senusert, and he too was a devotee of Ammon, Greek historians credited him with the conquest of Libya and Arabia, and significantly also of Ethiopia and all the islands of the Red Sea, of great parts of Asia, penetrating east even farther than the later Persians, and of invading Europe via Asia Minor. Herodotus described the great feats of this pharaoh, whom he names Sesostris, stating that Sesostris erected memorial pillars wherever he went. The pillars which he erected, Herodotus wrote, are still visible. Thus, when Alexander saw the pillar by the lake, it only confirmed what Herodotus had written a century earlier. Sesenchousis did indeed exist. His Egyptian name meant he whose births live. For by virtue of being a pharaoh of Egypt, he had every right to join the company of the gods and live forever. In the search for the waters of life or of eternal youth, it was important to assert that the search was surely not futile, for others in days past had succeeded in the quest. Moreover, if the waters flow from a paradise lost, would not finding those who had been there be a means of learning from them how to get there? It was with that in mind that Alexander sought to reach the immortal ancestors. Whether he indeed encountered them is not too important. The important fact is that in the centuries preceding the Christian era, Alexander or his historians, or both, believed that the immortal ancestors indeed existed, that in days that to them were ancient and olden, mortals could become immortal if the gods so wished. The authors or editors of the histories of Alexander relate various incidents in which Alexander encountered Sesenchousis, Elijah, and Enoch.
I can't believe that
or
run,
just
man.
Enoch. The identity of Sesenchousis could only be guessed, and the manner of his translation to immortality is not described. Not so with Elijah, the companion of Enoch in the Shining Temple, according to one Alexander version. He was the biblical prophet who was active in the kingdom of Israel in the 9th century BC, during the reign of kings Ahab and Ahaziah. As his adopted name indicated, Eli, Yah, my God is Yahweh, he was inspired by and stood up for the Hebrew God Yahweh, whose faithful were finding themselves harassed by the followers of the Canaanite god, Baal. After a period of seclusion at a secret place near the Jordan River, where he was apparently coached by the Lord, he was given a mantle of hair cloth of magical powers, and was able to perform miracles. Residing first near the Phoenician town of Sidon, his first reported miracle, as related in 1 Kings chapter 17, was the making of a little cooking oil and a spoonful of flour, lest a widow who gave him shelter the rest of her lifetime. Then he prevailed on the Lord to revive her son after he had died of a violent illness. He could also summon the fire of God from the skies, which came in handily in the ongoing struggle with the kings and priests who succumbed to pagan temptations. Of him, the scriptures say that he did not die on earth, for he went up into heaven in a whirlwind. According to Jewish traditions, Elijah is still immortal, and to this very day tradition requires that he be invited to come into Jewish homes.
Why did they give me the slow pause?
His ascent is described in the Old Testament in great detail, and as reported in 2 Kings chapter 2, the event was not a sudden or unexpected occurrence. On the contrary, it was a planned and prearranged operation whose place and time were communicated to Elijah in advance. The designated place was in the Jordan Valley, on the eastern side of the river, perhaps in the very area where Elijah was ordained as a man of God. As he began his last journey to Gilgal, a place commemorating an earlier miracle, as the Bible tells, he had a tough time shaking off his devoted chief disciple, Elisha. Along the way, the two prophets were repeatedly intercepted by disciples, sons of prophets, who kept asking, "Is it true that the Lord will take Elijah heavenward today?"
That's fucking bullshit.
Let the biblical narrator tell the story in his own words. And it came to pass when the Lord would take up Elijah into heaven by a whirlwind, that Elijah went up with Elisha from Gilgal. And Elijah said unto Elisha, "Tarry here, I pray thee, for the Lord has sent
bullshit.
me to Bethel."
They're slow
And
enemies.
Elisha said unto him, "As the Lord liveth, and by
It's
thy
really
life
slow. How
I
is it
will
that
not
slow?
leave thee." So they went down to Bethel. As the sons of the prophets that were at Bethel came forth to Elisha, and said unto him, Knowest thou that the Lord will this day take the master from above thee? And he said, Yea, I know it too, but keep silent. Now Elijah admitted to Elisha that his destination was Jericho, by the Jordan River, and he asked his colleague to stay behind. But again Elisha refused, and went along with the prophet. And so they came to Jericho. And the sons of the prophets that were at Jericho approached Elisha and said unto him, Knowest thou that the Lord will this day take the master from above thee? And he said, Yea, I know it too, but keep silent. Foiled thus far in his attempt to proceed alone, Elijah then asked Elisha to stay behind in Jericho and to let him proceed to the river's bank unaccompanied. But Elisha refused and would not part from Elijah. Encouraged, 50 men of the sons of the prophets went along, but they stopped and stood apart as the two, Elijah and Elisha, reached the Jordan. And Elijah took his mantle and rolled it together and struck the waters. And the waters parted hither and thither, and the two of them crossed over on dry ground. Once they were across, Elisha asked that Elijah imbue him with the divine spirit. But before he could get an answer, as they continued to walk on and to talk, there appeared a chariot of fire and horses of fire, and the two were separated. And Elijah went up into heaven in a whirlwind. And Elisha saw, and he cried out, my father, the chariot of Israel and its horsemen. And he saw it no more. Distraught, Elisha sat stunned for a while. Then he saw that the mantle of Elijah was left behind. Was it by accident or on purpose? Determined to find out, Elisha took the mantle and returned to the banks of the Jordan, and called the name of Yahweh, and struck the waters, and lo and behold, the waters parted hither and thither, and Elisha crossed. And the sons of the prophets, the disciples who stood back on the western side of the river in the plain of Jericho, saw this, and they said, The inspiration of Elijah doth rest upon Elisha.
Do it.
And they came toward him and prostrated themselves before him. Incredulous of what they had seen with their own eyes,
sounds foolproof, bro.
The disciples wondered whether Elijah was indeed taken heavenward for good. Perchance the Lord's wind had blown him only some distance, and he was thrown upon a mountain or into some ravine, they asked. Over the objections of Elisha, they searched for 3 days, and when they returned from the futile search, Elisha said, Did I not say unto you, Go not? For he well knew the truth, that the Lord of Israel had taken Elijah up in a chariot of fire. The encounter with Enoch, which the histories of Alexander claim for him, introduced into the search for immortality an immortal ancestor, specifically mentioned in the Old and New Testaments alike, the legends of whose ascent to the heavens predated the Bible and were recorded in their own right. According to the Bible, Enoch was the 7th pre-diluvian patriarch in the line of Adam through Seth, as distinct from the accursed line of Adam through Cain. He was the great-grandfather of Noah, the hero of the deluge. The 5th chapter of the book of Genesis lists the genealogies of these patriarchs, the ages at which their rightful heirs were born, and the ages at which they died. But Enoch was an exception. No mention at all is made of his death, explaining that he had walked with the Lord. The book of Genesis states that at the actual or symbolic age of 365, the number of days in a solar year, Enoch was gone from earth, for the Lord had taken him. Enlarging on the
full health,
statement,
22
commentators often quoted older sources,
insane,
which seemed to describe an actual ascent by Enoch to the heavens, where he was, by some versions, translated into Metatron, the Lord's Prince of the Countenance, who was stationed right behind the Lord's throne. According to these legends, as brought together by I.B. Lavner in his Kol-Agadoth Israel, all the legends of Israel, when Enoch was summoned to the Lord's abode, a fiery horse was sent for him from the heavens. Enoch was at the time preaching righteousness to the people. When the people saw the fiery horse descending from the skies, they asked Enoch for an explanation. And he told them, "Know ye that the time has come to leave ye, and ascend to heaven." But as he mounted the horse, the people refused to let him leave, and followed him about for a whole week. And it was on the 7th day that a fiery chariot drawn by fiery horses and angels came down and raised Enoch skyward. While he was soaring up, the angels of heaven objected to the Lord. "How comes a man born of a woman to ascend unto the heavens?" But the Lord pointed out the piety and devotion of Enoch, and opened to him the gates of life and of wisdom, and arrayed him in a magnificent garment and a luminous crown. As in other instances, cryptic references in the scriptures often suggest that the ancient editor assumed that his reader was familiar with some other more detailed writings on the subject at hand. There are even specific mentions of such writings, the Book of Righteousness or the Book of the Wars of Yahweh, which must have existed, but were entirely lost. In the case of Enoch, the New Testament augments a cryptic statement that Enoch was translated by the Lord, that he should not see death, with a mention of a testimony of Enoch, written or dictated by him before his translation to immortality. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 5. Jude 14, referring to the prophecies of Enoch, is also taken as referring to some actual writings by this patriarch. Various Christian writings throughout the centuries also contain similar hints or references, and as it turned out, there have in fact circulated since the 2nd century BC several versions of a Book of Enoch. When the manuscripts were studied in the 19th century, scholars concluded that there were basically two sources. The first, identified as one Enoch and called the Ethiopic Book of Enoch, is an Ethiopic translation of a previous Greek translation of an original work in Hebrew or Aramaic. The other, identified as 2 Enoch, is a Slavonic translation from an original.
Yo, what's up, Sir Stash? How you doing, man? I'm just gonna be right back for a sec. Be right back in like a few minutes, couple minutes.
Scholars who study these versions do not rule out the possibility that both 1 Enoch and 2 Enoch stem from a much earlier original work.
Happy Independence Day,
and that there indeed could have existed in antiquity a Book of Enoch,
Happy Independence
the
Day.
Apocrypha and Pseudepigrapha of the Old Testament, which R.H. Charles began to publish in 1913, is still the major English translation of the books of Enoch and the other early writings which were excluded from the canonized Old and New Testaments. Written in the first person, the Book of the Secrets of Enoch starts with an exact place and time. On the first day of the first month of the 365th year, I was alone in my house, and I rested on my bed and slept. And there appeared to me 2 men, very tall, such as I have never seen on earth, and their faces shone like the sun, and their eyes were like burning lamps, and fire came forth from their lips. Their dress had the appearance of feathers, their feet were purple, their wings were brighter than gold, their hands whiter than snow. They stood at the head of my bed and called me by my name. Because he was asleep when these strangers arrived, Enoch adds for the record that by then he was no longer sleeping. I saw clearly these men standing in front of me, he states. He made obeisance to them and was overtaken by fear, but the 2 reassured him. Be of good cheer, Enoch, be not afraid. The everlasting God hath sent us to thee, and lo, today thou shalt ascend with us into heaven. They then told Enoch to wake up his family and servants and order them not to seek him, till the Lord bring thee back to them. This Enoch did, using the opportunity to instruct his sons in the ways of righteousness. Then the time came to depart. It came to pass when I had spoken to my sons, these men summoned me, and took me on their wings, and placed me on the clouds. And lo, the clouds moved. Going higher, I saw the air, and going still higher, I saw the ether. And they placed me in the first heaven, and they showed me a very great sea, greater than the earthly sea. Ascending thus unto the heavens upon clouds that move, Enoch was transported from the first heaven, where 200 angels ruled the stars, to the second gloomy heaven, Then to the third heaven. There he was shown a garden with goodliness in its appearance, beautiful and fragrant trees and fruits. In the midst therein there is a tree of life, in that place on which the God rests when he comes into paradise. Stunned by the tree's magnificence, Enoch manages to describe the tree of life in the following words: "It is beautiful more than any created thing. On all sides in appearance it is like gold and crimson, transparent as fire. From its root go 4 streams which pour honey, milk, oil, and wine, and they go down from this heavenly paradise to the paradise of Eden, making a revolution around earth. This third heaven and its tree of life are guarded by 300 very glorious angels. It is in this third heaven that the place of the righteous and the terrible place where the wicked are tortured are situated. Going further up to the fourth heaven, Enoch could see the luminaries and various wondrous creatures, and the host of the Lord. In the fifth heaven he saw many hosts. In the sixth, bands of angels who study the revolutions of the stars. Then he reached the seventh heaven, where the greatest angels hurried about, and where he saw the Lord from afar, sitting on his throne. The 2 winged men and their moving cloud placed Enoch at the limits of the seventh heaven, and left, whereupon the Lord sent the archangel Gabriel to fetch Enoch into his presence. For 33 days Enoch was instructed in all the wisdoms and all the events of the past and the future. Then he was returned to earth by an awful angel, who had a very cold appearance. In total he was absent from earth 60 days. But his return to earth was only so that he might instruct his sons in the laws and commandments. And 30 days later he was taken up again unto the heavens, this time for good. Written both as a personal testament and as a historic review, the Ethiopic Book of Enoch, whose earliest title was probably the Words of Enoch, describes his journeys to heaven as well as to the 4 corners of earth. As he traveled north toward the north ends of earth, he saw there a great and glorious device, the nature of which is not described. And he saw there, as well as at the western ends of earth, 3 portals of heaven open in the heaven, in each place, through which hail and snow, cold and frost blew in. And thence I went to the south to the ends of the earth, and through the portals of heaven there blow in the dew and rain. And thence he went to see the eastern portals, through which the stars of heaven pass and run their course. But the principal mysteries and secrets of the past and the future were shown to Enoch as he went to the middle of the earth, and to the east and to the west thereof. The middle of the earth was the site of the future holy temple in Jerusalem. On his journey east, Enoch reached the tree of knowledge, and going west, he was shown the tree of life. On his eastward journey, Enoch passed mountains and deserts, saw water courses flowing from mountain peaks covered by clouds, and snow and ice, water which flows not, and trees of diverse fragrances and balsams. Going farther and farther east, he found himself back over mountains bordering the Erythraean Sea, the Sea of Arabia, and the Red Sea. Continuing, he passed by Zotiel, the angel guarding the entrance to paradise. And he came unto the garden of righteousness. There he saw, among many wonderful trees, the tree of knowledge. It was as high as a fir, its leaves were as that of the carob, and its fruit like the clusters of a vine. And the angel who was with him confirmed that indeed it was the very tree whose fruit Adam and Eve had eaten before they were driven out of the Garden of Eden. On his journey west, Enoch arrived at a mountain range of fire which burnt day and night. Beyond it, he reached a place encircled by 6 mountains, separated by deep, rough ravines. A 7th mountain rose in their midst, resembling the seat of a throne, and fragrant trees encircled the throne. And amongst them was a tree such as I had never smelt, and its fruit resembles the dates of a palm. The angel who accompanied him explained that the middle mountain was the throne, on which the Holy Great One, the Lord of Glory, the Eternal King, will sit when he shall come to visit earth. And as to the tree whose fruits were as the date palms, he said, "As for this fragrant tree, no mortal is permitted to touch it till the great judgment." Its fruit shall be for food, for the elect, its fragrance shall be in their bones, and they shall live a long life on earth. It was during these journeys that Enoch saw in those days how long cords were given to those angels, and they took to themselves wings, and they went towards the north. And when Enoch asked what this was all about, the angel who guided him said, "They have gone off to measure. They shall bring the measures of the righteous to the righteous, and the ropes of the righteous to the righteous. All these measures shall reveal the secrets of the earth." Having visited all the secret places on earth, Enoch's time had come to take the journey to heaven, and like others after him, he was taken to a mountain whose summit reached to heaven, and to a land of darkness. And they, the angels, took me to a place in which those who were there were like flaming fire. And when they wished, they appeared as men. And they brought me to a place of darkness, and to a mountain the point of whose summit reached to heaven. And I saw the chambers of the luminaries, and the treasuries of the stars, and of the thunder, and the great depths, where were a fiery bow and arrows, and their quiver, and a fiery sword, and all the lightnings. Whereas at such a crucial stage, immortality slipped out of Alexander's hands because he had searched for it contrary to his proclaimed destiny, Enoch, as the pharaohs after him, was proceeding with divine blessing. Thus, at this crucial moment, he was deemed worthy of proceeding, so they, the angels, took me to the waters of life. Continuing, he arrived at the house of fire. And I went in till I drew nigh to a wall, which is built of crystals, and surrounded by tongues of fire, and it began to affright me. And I went into the tongues of fire, and drew nigh to a large house, which was built of crystals, and the walls of the house were like a tessellated floor of crystals, and its groundwork was of crystal. Its ceiling was like the path of the stars and the lightnings, and between them were fiery cherubim, and their heaven was as water. A flaming fire surrounded the walls, and its portals blazed with fire. And I entered into that house, and it was hot as a fire, and cold as ice. And I beheld a vision. Behold, there was a second house, greater than the former, and the entire portal stood open before me, and it was built of flames of fire. And I looked therein and saw a lofty throne. Its appearance was as crystal, and the wheels thereof as the shining sun, and there was the appearance of cherubim. And from underneath the throne came streams of flaming fire, so that I could not look thereon. Arriving at the river of fire, Enoch was taken aloft. He could see the whole of earth, the mouths of all the rivers of earth, and the cornerstones of earth, and the winds on earth carrying the clouds. Rising higher, he was where the winds stretch the vaults of heaven and have their station between heaven and earth. I saw the winds of heaven which turn and bring the circumference of the sun, and all the stars. Following the paths of the angels, he reached a point in the firmament of heaven above, from which he could see the end of earth. From there he could view the expanse of the heavens, and he could see 7 stars like great shining mountains, 7 mountains of magnificent stones. From wherever he was viewing these celestial bodies, 3 were toward the east, where there was the region of heavenly fire. There Enoch saw rising and falling columns of fire, eruptions of fire, which were beyond measure, alike toward the width and toward the depth. On the other side 3 celestial bodies were toward the south. There Enoch saw an abyss, a place which had no firmament of the heaven above, and no firmly founded earth below. It was a void and awesome place. When he asked the angel who was carrying him aloft for an explanation, he replied, "There the heavens were completed. It is the end of heaven and earth. It is a prison for the stars and the host of heaven." The middle star reached to heaven like the throne of God, having the appearance of alabaster, and the summit of the throne as of sapphire. The star was like a flaming fire. Journeying on in the heavens, Enoch said, I proceeded to where things were chaotic, and I saw there something horrible. What he saw was stars of the heaven bound together, And the angel explained to him, "These are of the number of stars of heaven which have transgressed the commandment of the Lord, and are bound here till 10,000 years are consummated." Concluding his report of the first journey to heaven, Enoch said, "And I, Enoch, alone saw the vision, the ends of all things, and no man shall see as I have seen." After being taught at the heavenly abode all manner of wisdom, he was returned to earth to impart teachings to other men. For an unspecified length of time, Enoch was hidden, and no one of the children of men knew where he was hidden, and where he abode, and what had become of him. But when the deluge neared, he wrote down his teachings and advised his great-grandson Noah to be righteous and worthy of salvation. After that, Enoch was once again raised aloft from among those who dwell on earth. He was raised aloft on the chariot of the spirits, and his name vanished among them. The adventures of Alexander and his search for the immortal ancestors clearly comprised elements which simulated their experiences: caverns, angels, subterranean fires, fiery horses, and chariots of fire. But it is equally clear that in the centuries preceding the Christian era, it was believed, by Alexander or by his historians or by both, that if one wished to attain immortality, one had to emulate the Egyptian pharaohs. Accordingly, Alexander's claim to semi-divine ancestry was evolved from a complicated affair by an Egyptian deity, rather than by simply claiming affinity to a local Greek god. It is an historical fact, not mere legend, that Alexander found it necessary, as soon as he broke through the Persian lines in Asia Minor, not to pursue the Persian enemy, but to go to Egypt, there to seek the answer to his purported divine roots, and from there to begin the search for the waters of life. Whereas the Hebrews, the Greeks, and other peoples in antiquity recounted tales of a unique few who were able to escape a mortal's fate by divine invitation, the ancient Egyptians developed the privilege into a right, not a universal right, nor a right reserved to the singularly righteous, but a right attendant on the Egyptian king, the pharaoh, by sole virtue of having sat on the throne of Egypt. The reason for this, according to the traditions of ancient Egypt, was that the first rulers of Egypt were not men, but gods. Egyptian traditions held that in times immemorial, gods of heaven came to earth from the celestial disk. When Egypt was inundated by waters,
guys, I might sign off, my friends.
In the earliest
I might enjoy the night.
arrived in Egypt and
I'm
literally
sorry.
raised it from under the waters
I
and mud
apologize.
by damming the waters of the Nile and undertaking extensive
my
diking
God.
and land reclamation works. It was therefore that Egypt was nicknamed the Raised Land. This olden god was named Ptah, the developer. He was considered to have been a great scientist, a master engineer and architect, the chief craftsman of the gods, who even had a hand in creating
Thanks,
and
Toad, for
shaping
being here.
man.
Thanks,
His
Stash.
staff was frequently
But
depicted
I'm
as a
just
graduated
like,
stick, very much like the graduated rod which surveyors employ
I'm
for
gonna
field
stop now.
measuring
I'm gonna
nowadays.
feel good. I might play
Images
tomorrow.
of the gods of Egypt can be found in the bonus PDF under Figure 7. The Egyptians believed that Ptah eventually retired south,
2 hours?
where
Yeah,
he
that's
could
fine.
continue to control
That's
the
not too
waters of
bad.
the Nile with
Thanks,
sluices
guys.
he had installed in the secret cavern, located at the first cataract of the Nile, the site of today's Aswan Dam. But before leaving Egypt, he built its first hallowed city and named it An, in honor of the god of the heavens, the biblical An, whom the Greeks called Heliopolis. There he installed as Egypt's first divine ruler his own son, Ra, so named in honor of the celestial globe. Ra, a great god of heaven and earth, caused a special shrine to be built at An. It housed the Benben, a
Thanks for
secret
being here.
object in which Ra had purportedly come down
Thank you,
to
Toad.
earth
Thank
from
you,
the heavens.
Stash.
In time, Ra divided the kingdom between the gods Osiris and Seth. But the sharing of the kingdom between the two divine brothers did not work. Seth kept seeking the overthrow and death of his brother Osiris. It took some doing But finally Seth succeeded in tricking Osiris into entering a coffin, which Seth promptly set to seal and drown. Isis, the sister and wife